Those pregnant pictures were not me. Thank you, Jim, for those kind words, and thank you all for staying long enough to hear and see this award. Most of you have seen these many times. I've probably seen more, so I know how boring it can actually become. Nevertheless, Jim asked that I take 5 minutes of your time to accept the honor so everyone can get back to work. There are deals waiting to be done, and I promise not to delay the activities towards that end, although it's pretty hard to take 52 years and put them in 5 minutes. So what can one say who receives such an award? How can one accept with thanks to so many in such a short time? And how, after over 50 years attached to one of the world's great industries, can remarks to you not be repetitive with platitudes and redundancy? It's a tough task, but bear with me, I'll try to be a little creative. Many people in this industry and others in education and politics ask me, how did you do it? How have so many years, so many companies, so many bosses, so many employees not simply driven you out, or in fact driven you crazy? What is the secret not to success, but in fact, what is the secret of survival? Some who know me best know I have a temper, so I throw golf clubs, knock and slam doors, throw electronic devices across the room. They simply can't believe I haven't thrown the towel in from frustration, aggravation, and in fact, dismay. But I've compiled a list of who I owe my survival to and what I owe my survival to as follows. 1, my wife, Andrea, nearly 52 years of putting up with my mishigas, which for those of you who don't know translates into craziness. Without her and my 3 sons, who have supported and inspired me to work harder and to do better things, I'd not be here today. 2, the continual challenge of making a difference and finding a new way to win, of never giving up in spite of all the adversity of all the lousy hotels I had to fix and all the great ones I had to fix too. 3, the love for those that make it happen, from the hourly worker to the senior executives, the sense that everyone I touch who touches me has a place and a special part to not only my success, but to the success of the organization or entity to which they are a part. 4th, a respect for all the people from all the countries, races, religions, and backgrounds who have educated me about their countries, their values and desires, and have made this large, unfriendly world a laboratory for me and contributed knowledge I could never even have dreamed of from the ghetto in which I was nurtured in the Dorchester-Mattapan section of Boston. 5th, my parents and grandparents who instilled in me, an only child, a desire to please them not only with love, but to please them with simply being a good human being, as they taught me tolerance and justice and ethics. Next, my bosses. I have had many of you know them, who educated me and continue to do so, as they taught me patience and a keen awareness that although not perfect, they were fallible too, as we all are. Next, Shakespeare, a great teacher of the secrets of survival. I remember well the father Polonius in Hamlet, and his advice to his son, Laertes, on his way to board a boat to Paris, when he said, quote, "This above all, to thine own self be true, and it must follow as the night after the day, thou cannot be false to any man," unquote. Unless we can be true to ourselves first, we cannot be true to others. Accepting truth about ourselves is difficult, especially to those of us who have experienced the opposite. But truths have given me strength at times when weaker principles might have caused discouragement to yield to another way. Lastly, my secret to survival is emboldened by being a citizen of the world's greatest democracy that gave the opportunity and freedom to those that risked their lives for the benefit of others, and whose gift of that freedom, for all with malice towards none, gave me and all of you here a pathway to success. Since I am in Hollywood today, getting an Oscar, I guess, I'm bound to say the following. I worry deeply about others coming after me, for as the curtain goes down on my days as a practitioner, what will come next? And how will those who follow be given the same as I have been given? Wealth creation is not an accident of history, whether for nations as people of the West or for billions of others struggling for basic necessities in the developing world. Only when the principles of freedom, competition, and personal responsibility are recognized can our country and others continue on a path to prosperity. But as Ayn Rand so aptly said, intellectual freedom stems from economic freedom, and economic freedom stems from the free market. Most of you here know that. America's abundance was not created by public sacrifices to the common good, but by the productive genius of free people, free men and women, who pursued their own personal interests and the making of their private fortunes. We here must continue to educate those that follow the benefits in our system that has provided the greatest standard of living to the most people in the world's history. We can never allow government to be the provider of that freedom, just the protector. Government will never surpass the individual's right to seek his or her fortune, no matter the career, no matter the initiative. Government will, like a malignancy not removed or abated, grow to interfere and prevent and regulate, proving again and again an inability to solve these problems. Problems that only free individuals with their innate capability and thirst for a better life can solve. My hope for this industry now is to make a unified effort to establish a rightful path to citizenship for those non-documented immigrants and their children. We are not a country that will send law-abiding people away. We are a country built on the back of immigrants, relatives of us, and many of our employees in this industry. I'd ask all of you to urge AH&LA, HSMAI, and your companies to come together and to make a decision to give freedom to those who deserve it, remembering where we all came from and why our ancestors came to these shores. Lastly, I have only a simple wish for all of you here and for all of those not. That as the sun sets on your efforts, you would have the same feelings of satisfaction that I have experienced, the same feelings of accomplishments, the same feelings of self-respect that I have. If so, you would have kept the flame and the will burning in the hearts of all men and women in our industry and others, alive to survive another day and for future generations. Thank you again.
Want to do a few questions?
Oh, sure, if you want to do it. Sure.
We are running a little ahead of schedule, so if that were to happen, Mike and I were talking about spending a few minutes just having a conversation and talking about a few things. So we're gonna spend about 5-10 minutes and just sort of talk about a few things about Mr. Leven. Did you really consider the bra and girdle business?
Actually, I did, and as luck would have it, probably, if I took the job, the burning of bras would have started 10 years earlier, and I would have nothing to sell.
What, Mike, if you did not go into the hotel business, what do you think you would have been doing? What would the career have looked like, do you think?
Well, I actually believe I'm an accidental person in the hotel business. I never really had a desire a thought of going into it. When I graduated with my master's degree from Boston University, I was going to be married a few months later, and I needed a job. I tried to get a job in advertising and public relations. I couldn't. And consequently, I just went to BU Placement, and they said, well, we have a job with what was then called Hotel Corporation of America in New York at the Roosevelt. And it was a sales promotion manager job. It wasn't a sales job, actually. I didn't know anything about sales promotion either. It was $98 a week. I went for the interview and I got the job. That lasted about a month. They cut the job out. It was my first job reduction. And they said, you can go into sales. So I ended up in sales, and I guess I inherited some sales skills from my father, who was a traveling salesman. So I was an accidental hotelier. In fact, I think I might have stayed in one hotel in my life before that time. I stayed in motels, but not hotels. So I didn't know anything about it, and I had to learn the business from the ground up. So I was supposed to be a lawyer. I left law school. I hated that, and I'm not a big fan of lawyers, although some here are my friends.
There's some good ones out here.
Some here. But it really was accidental. I think that I always wanted some kind of situation where I was involved with people. I loved camping in the summer. I loved teaching. I loved acting and directing. And I always wanted to be in some position that was that way. It took me a long time, but once I was in the selling phase, I was involved with not only people to sell to, but people to deliver. And so the business just kind of fit.
When you look back at the last 50 years in your career, what makes you smile? What makes you really happy? What makes you smile? What most proud of? Whatever that means. What makes you smile?
I think that when you look backwards, you want to feel that you've made a difference. And I think I've had the great privilege of making a difference not only on a personal basis to many people that I've touched along the way, but I made a difference to the various companies that I worked for as well. And I think the best thing, what I smile about, is what I accomplish. You know, you don't always win, but if you play the game well and you feel good about that, it's always a great feeling of satisfaction. And I think if I were writing things down, I think I'd write about half the book about the people and about half the book about the actual results. And I think they've been good.
Okay. Well, there's a lot of young people in the room today. There's some students here, of course, and a lot of people who want to be a Mike Leven. I mean, they aspire to things that you've achieved in life. How do you define leadership? What does being a leader mean to you?
Well, first of all, I guess I may be the oldest. I don't think there's anybody older than me in this room. If they are, stand up and come up here. I just want to make sure.
Joe, maybe. Yeah.
No, Joe. I don't know about Joe. You know, Joe and I lived around the corner with each other for years. But I think, you know, I don't think you can teach leadership. I think my view of leadership is that you assume a certain responsibility, and if you feel responsible for other people, your responsibility is to make them successful, no matter what you do, whether it's a sports team, whether it's directing a play, whether it's in business. And I think if you want to assume responsibility for other people, you can be a good leader. If you don't want to assume responsibility for other people, you won't be a good leader. And I think we see that with a lot of great entrepreneurs. They're not necessarily leaders, like Steve Jobs or Sheldon Adelson or others like that, who are great visionary people. Generally, they're not as sensitive to the responsibility for other people. Their responsibility lends towards the idea. When you get to be a chief operating officer, like I've had many times, you end up feeling responsible for people, and I think that's the best way to lead, the best way to feel that you can help them be successful, and that's your job. So I think if you don't grow up with a sense of responsibility for the other people around you, you won't achieve leadership.
So you spent a lot of time stepping into messy situations and fixing them. Which was the toughest?
Well, I think I've had about 5 different situations. They were all tough to a certain extent, you know, because when you're doing turnarounds or repositioning companies, difficult decisions have to be made strategically as well as humanly. And I think that the human decisions are always the toughest, when you got to tell people that there's no longer a job, or you're changing the basic processes in the company. I'd have to say probably this one, the last 4 years, was the toughest turnaround, because it was so dangerous, meaning that it was so close. The company was in really tough shape, and things had to be done fast. And sometimes you go to a company, like when we were doing Holiday Inn, moving that company around, or Days Inn, we moved that company around, or a couple before that, Americana, you know, a few others. There was time, you had time. So in time you can be, it's not really as rough, the sense of crisis is not there that day. But in this particular situation, The company in the fall of 2008 was in dire straits. It was 6 hours away from a covenant breach, which would have put the lenders involved and might have changed the governance and everything of the company. The stock had gone down from 148 to $1.35 or something like that. And when I got there in March 9th of 2009, the stock was $1.55. And it was kind of hanging around, and Sheldon Adelson had to put $1 billion into the business to keep it going until we could fix it. And we had to do a massive cost reduction in a very short period of time in order to get an IPO done for our Macau business, and had to get Singapore open within 12 months, and actually about 13 months. So, and we had the cash situation was terrible. So we had to move very quickly. I think that was the toughest one, and the global nature of it, the governmental and regulatory nature of the business, I'd probably say that was the toughest one.
Okay. And I popped into your office a couple of years ago, I don't know if you remember the conversation, but you were sharing with me some sort of parameters. The company, I assumed it was just a big gaming company, and there's so much more to the company. Can you share a little bit about sort of how the company's made up?
You know, I think Las Vegas Sands looks to the world like a gaming company, but it's really an integrated resort company. In the United States, our profitability from gaming is about 30% in Las Vegas. In Asia, it's about 70% comes from gaming, and gaming supports the investments that we make in Asia. I think we have shopping malls that are worth billions of dollars that we own in Asia. We're an entertainment company, a shopping mall company, a meeting and convention company. We have massive amounts of space and exhibit space. We could handle this conference, by the way, in Las Vegas.
We'll talk after.
You want to move, you know, we could.
ALIS goes to Singapore, right?
Well, no, how about Las Vegas rather than Los Angeles? I think most of the people here would rather be in Las Vegas anyway. It's a little easier to get around, you know. See? So I got to close a deal here at least. But we can, you know, so we're in all those businesses, and at the end of the day, I mean, just to give you an example, in Macau, in the month of December, 5 million people visited our properties, came through our counters. We count people as they come in. So the things are massive, and so I think we're in the people business, not only for guests but for employees. We got 50,000 employees now, and we were into everything. So it's not just gaming. You know.
What? A lot of people here, obviously everybody's in the investment community here. What do you think are some of the biggest opportunities in the next 5 to 10 years in our industry?
Well, I think we're going to look. That's a very tough question, and there'll be all kinds of differences. I think the big brands are going to have to make some very strategic changes. I think the big brands cannot live off the backs of franchisees and owners in the same way 5 years from now that they're doing it now. I think they're running out of things to do. I think they're going to have to make some judgments about their strategic situation in terms of whether they want to go back in the asset business or not. And I think that some of them are going to go back in order to move their needle. When you're so big as they are today, to get their earnings up, they're either going to have to do two things: buy back stock or buy assets. They have cash, and I imagine some of these companies will consider the strategies they've had over the last 10 or 15 years and maybe make some changes. I'm a big believer that the status quo is a prescription for failure, that if you continue to do the same thing year after year after year, you're going to gradually deteriorate or be subject to the macroeconomic environment. And why do you need to pay big money to people to be subject to the economic environment? You need to pay big money to people who are going to make changes and get greater results from doing things differently in whatever the environment is. So I think you're going to see that in the big brands. From a small deal perspective, opportunities, I think major gateway cities in this country and all over the world are going to continue to be asset rich. I always said if I could have a hotel company, I'd only want to own New York, Paris, and London, and you can take all the rest of the cities and fight it out, guys, but I'll buy all in there. I should have done that in the 60s, but I think those things are going to continue to exist and continue to be attractive over the long haul. And I think the world is going to change. It's getting much smaller for everybody. Today, it's the Chinese. Before the Chinese, it was the Middle Easterners. Before the Middle Easterners, it was the Japanese buyers. These buyers are going to continue to rotate. But at the end of the day, I have great faith in this country, in spite of the fact that I'm worried. We still have the biggest economy in the world, and if we could get the right kind of people leading it, and the right kind of people fighting for it, I still believe that we'll continue to be important. So I think there are going to be change, particularly in this conference with the people here. I think you're going to see a lot more activity with big companies getting back into the asset business. That would be my prediction. I could be wrong, but it's probably way out for somebody's thinking here, but I think that's where we're going.
We'll come back visit that in a few years. One last question, because we're going to be out of time. It was inauguration week. Mike Leven was just inaugurated President of the United States on Monday. What one or two things would you do first?
Well, I think I do. One or two things. I've thought about that, but I'm too old. But I wouldn't put it in order of priority, but I submitted my tax return to the United States last year. It was 250 pages to the federal government and 900 additional pages to the states. So it was 1,100 pages altogether. And I'm in Korea with a guy, and I'm saying to him, what's your tax situation? He says, well, I paid 39%. And I said, well, how big was it? He said, 1 page. I said, 1 page? I said, well, that's 1,100 pages. I paid 31.5%. And I said, it's ridiculous. So I think one of the first things I do would be I'd get out of the deduction business with the exception of charitable deductions. I get rid of all the deductions. I get to a 1-page form. I'd eliminate about 85% of the employees in the IRS and about half the tax lawyers and insurance guys in the country. The second thing I would do, coincidental to that, would be I'd fix this undocumented immigrant thing. This is the most horrendous thing that I can imagine that's going on in this country. Nobody here, if anybody here was undocumented and they had children in school and they're worrying every single day that somebody's going to come in from the feds, put handcuffs on them and throw them over the border to Guatemala or Mexico or Salvador or someplace, it's time we screwed it up by letting these people come in illegally, and it's now our responsibility to fix it. I'd give them a 5-year work card. I'd have the immigration officer inspect them every year. I'd put them on a Social Security number. I'd let them be human beings. I'd do that immediately, and I wouldn't care what Congress said or anybody else said. I would do it, and I guess the third thing I would do is I'd put term limits on the President of the United States, 1 year, 1 term for 6 years. I'd put term limits on the Congress, senators and Republicans and Democrats. So the Congress 2 terms or 3, and Senate maybe 2 terms. That's it, and you're out. And lastly, I'd cut out all lobbying and make it illegal. No lobbying, no nothing, no special interests. Goodbye.
Yeah. There you have it.
So no one's going to vote for me for president, I understand.
Given that you're definitely not too old to run, let's keep that in mind. Ladies and gentlemen, just one housekeeping announcement. We have to turn this room back to a room in about 45 minutes. So thank you for being here. Mr. Leven, again, congratulations. Your well-deserved reward. Thank you.